Hello, everybody out there in Facebook world, social media world. This is Kate White, and I'm here with one of my friends, Charisse Basquin. We're going to be doing a little talk about a new study that Charisse is doing, which is really, I think, key and pivotal to our field of practice. And I wanted to introduce you to Charisse, and then we can go ahead and have her talk a little bit more about herself, too, and what she's doing. Charisse has in her 35th year of practicing combining chiropractic with craniosacral therapy and pre and perinatal somatic therapy. She has almost 20 years of pre and perinatal somatic therapy and 15 years of birth assistant with Alaska Midwives. So she lives in Scotland now. I hope you'll tell more about your life in Scotland, but she's been working with people of all ages, from convicts. Yeah, I did a little talk with her, and she talked a lot about the gangs that she works with there in Scotland too, to convents and cloistered nuns in England. Wow, you have a lot of experience, Charisse, but different group. She assisted the famous Ray Castellino for 5 years. Along with private practice, she facilitates the Castellino model workshops to integrate our early imprints, those are our experiences from our preconception, prenatal time, birth, and afterbirth. And right now she is studying birth trauma. She's getting a degree at the University of Chester, and she's researching birth trauma. And really, she's one of those movers and shakers in our field that's trying to make things so much better for mothers and babies, or birthing parents and babies, let's say. Charisse, why don't you just take a minute and talk a little bit about your work and the things you're doing there in Scotland?
My favorite topic. I like what Kate just said, from convicts to convents. It's all about bonding, really. So the fundamental piece that helps us have contentment with ourselves and with each other is, are we able to be connected with ourselves, with each other? And that starts from the beginning. I have a sense I'm speaking to the choir here, and that most people already know that these beginning times have a huge impact on who we are in our relationships, and our relationships with ourselves, with each other, with Mother Earth. So I've been doing that with passion for quite a while now, and we'll keep on doing it.
Right. Okay. Well, we're here to talk about the study because I'll put up the icon that she created about the study in our comment section below. And for those of you, just sit back and for the next 15 minutes, just listen a little bit to the ways that we're trying to document the importance of birth, the way we welcome our babies, and the way we support birthing parents and babies as they head towards labor and delivery. So, Charisse, why don't you just take a moment and talk about this work that you're doing?
Okay. So thank you, Kate, and help me stay on track, okay? Give me a sign if I start going too far down one of my passion holes.
Okay.
So, yeah, I was hanging out with one of my midwife friends and colleagues, Dana Brown, in Alaska. She was on call for a birth of a Russian immigrant family. And she was reflecting on what was coming up with the birth of this baby. And she sat with a sense of contentment and said, I love my Russian moms. They come in, they have babies. And there was something about the simplicity of the knowing of what was likely to happen that felt really right. And then I had the privilege of being in Georgia a couple years ago. Georgia by Ukraine, by Armenia, by Russia. And I met a woman in a village that was 14 miles dirt horse track to get to the next village. She had given birth by herself, literally. No partner, no woman mate, or she and the baby made their way into birthing. And when I looked at her stunned, she was like, it's what you do. And then hanging out with midwives, as I've had the incredible privilege to for quite a while now. Oftentimes you'll hear, oh yeah, this mom's coming in. I attended her birth when she was being born. Or, oh yes, this mom's partner, I attended his birth when he was being born. And there was something about when that experience came before, there seemed to be more likelihood of having an uncomplicated, healthy birth at home or in the birth center. And the same with breastfeeding. We notice that those who are able to breastfeed their babies with ease are more likely to have breastfed themselves. And their partners oftentimes were breastfed themselves. If the mother wasn't breastfed themselves when they were babies, but their partners were, there seemed to be more success in the ease of breastfeeding, which made me really look at, like, what is that? What's going on there? Many midwives will ask, what was your own birth like when you were being born? But why? So what I'm looking at in this study is there a connection with how one was born themselves and how that same person gives birth? Yeah. So the ultimate reason for doing this is that if there's the connection. So I think I should back up. I always get ahead of myself here.
You're not a feet first baby, are you?
I'm not. I was pulled out by the forceps, and I haven't gotten over it. So looking at postpartum post-traumatic stress disorder is something that comes on a lot. I mean, we've heard about the baby blues, postpartum depression. Studies vary, but it looks like 10-15% of the literature says women and mothers who have given birth suffer from postpartum depression. And postpartum PTSD varies from about 2-ish% to up to 7% of the people suffer from PTSD after their births. And just a quick flag, PTSD is thrown around a lot these days, trauma is thrown around a lot these days. So a traumatic incident is not always considered traumatizing to the individual. And in order to have PTSD, the full diagnosis, a minimum of 3 criteria need to get met. One is hypervigilance, constantly being on alert for the potential of the threat of what hurt them in the past. Avoidance, acting in ways to avoid anything that could trigger the possibility of the threat. For example, let's say I got hit by a red car, which I didn't, but I may for the rest of my life never buy a red car, but not even consciously know that. And then the third symptom required to get that full diagnosis is intrusions, or commonly called flashbacks. So a flashback can be visual. They can see what happened back then. Could be olfactory. They could smell. Like people who had fires will oftentimes have olfactory hallucinations. Tastes, skin sensations can come on as if they're happening in the moment. So back to postpartum PTSD, too many people are having that. I also see the partners also traumatized. And most people acknowledge that the baby is also very traumatized as well.
Well, I recently, do you know who Rebecca Decker is?
I only know her name. I haven't met her.
Well, the evidence-based birth is her organization, which is very good. Like, it's nice to have someone who's actually tracking the research and keeps it up and adds to it. She's very thorough. She says 1 in 3 of us have birth trauma. So I thought that was an interesting statistic because I also tried to track I know Penny Simpkins says between 25 and 37% of us have birth trauma. So it's very significant and it's not well addressed. It's true.
Yes. And I also just want to be sorry to be the academic here, because we can be so annoying, but there's a difference between trauma. So many have had birth trauma, but don't go into full-blown PTSD.
That's right.
So
Right.
I just want to differentiate that out. And yes, far more than the numbers I gave have, as you said, traumatic births and traumatic birthing experiences. Yes. So
You're doing a study. You're doing a very important study.
Thank you. Yeah. So things that we know that trigger postpartum PTSD, which also goes into what was traumatic, are having had trauma before. And that includes childhood experiences. And of course, it includes sexual abuse. Other things that can cause a birth to be traumatic was there a stillborn or a traumatic birth that happened before? Those who are really afraid of giving birth have a much higher likelihood of having a traumatic birth. So I was speaking to my midwife buddy when I was just getting started in this research, and she said, amazing. Just a week ago, a young woman came in at 22, 23 years old, and she came in for birth control. And she says, I am petrified of giving birth. And my midwife buddy, Julie, said, well, really? Tell me about your own birth. What do you know? She goes, I don't know anything about it except I just heard it was horrid. So again, we know that fear of childbirth increases the likelihood of having a traumatic birth. And there are many other things. What hasn't been looked at is how one was born and how they give birth. And that's my intention at what I'm looking at. Is there an implicit body memory, an implicit procedural memory that shows up when it's time to give birth themselves? I have a sense there are, and certainly that seems to be what we in the field think we're seeing, and that's what I want to look at. Is there? And how does it look?
Yeah. When we talked about this the other day, you talked about how, we know from looking at birth that there's instrumental birth, like they have vacuum assist and forceps. There's surgical birth, which is C-section. And we know that there are patterns that can show up both prenatally and in the feeding after birth. So I don't know if you want to give any kind of more overview of anything that you know about, or ways that if we do this research, how we can improve the work how do we support mother-baby dyads better?
Thank you. I mean, yes. So the overarching reason for why I want to do this research is, can we identify prenatally those who are at risk of having a traumatic birth? Not just so that we can identify them, so that they can then have the awareness, so that they can access resources to support the integration of their own early traumatic experiences or their own birth experiences before they give birth. Because what I believe I've seen in my work, and I know other people in the field are seeing, is that when we work with the mom prior to giving birth, either prenatally or preconception, and they integrate, they work with and come to a different relationship with their own traumatic experiences, they're more likely to have an uncomplicated, healthy birth. So if we can, if what I'm looking at is a factor, if there's associations with how we were born, if there is a connection, they can get help before they have the trauma.
Yes. Yeah. So tell people about your study, like how
Yes.
to find you and what you want.
Thank you. Yeah, how can you find me? I do have a Facebook page, Charisse Basquin. Kate has posted this as well. Um, and Kate, you're going to have to help me out on all the social media. I'm doing an online study, and it's an online survey. So what I'm asking is for people to fill out the survey about your own birth experiences. So what I'm looking at, the survey asks questions on a physical nature, in an emotional nature. So the physical will be questions like, when you were being born, were forceps used? Or did you have an emergency cesarean? Or what kind of medications, if any, were used? And then I mirror that when you gave birth. Um, did the same thing happen? So I'm looking at physical aspects, and there's several questions on that. And I'm looking at emotional ones. Some of the questions can be distressing. So questions of the emotional nature are things like, was your mother afraid of giving birth? How did your mother feel about being pregnant at the time? Was she planning to be pregnant when she got pregnant with you? And so looking at the sense of what the welcoming was for the individual who's filling out the study, and how did their births show up. So we're looking at those possibilities and how they might be interrelated. Were they more apt to have a traumatic birth? And also looking at what happened after birth, shortly after birth, not shortly, perinatal period. So for example, was there separation? And if there was, how much? Was there skin-to-skin contact with your mother? Did you have skin-to-skin contact with your baby? And other questions, so some of the questions can be distressing, because sometimes a mother may realize, or a parent may realize, that there were things that could have been done that weren't done to support their baby. And so also on the questionnaire, there's access to resources for you that if some of the questions do unsettle you. Yeah.
Well, I know that you're looking to publish the results of the study so that we can really be much more aware of how we welcome our babies and how we can improve our services to birthing families. So I know you're looking for like 300 or 400 people to participate in this study. 700?
I'm aiming for 700.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm
Love
aiming
it.
for 700. So.
Well, everybody out there, like if you're into helping improve the world for mothers and babies and birth parents, just really, spread out the announcement of the study, because I do know that we are made some pretty big improvements in how we understand the baby's experience, but really helping people understand at birth how to help babies and mothers and birthing parents and birthing families and staff even. This is the final frontier for us, that those of us who've been working in this field for 20 years, and
Yeah.
study's really important. So now, Charisse, would you like to say
Thank you.
anything more about the study before we complete?
Well, I think I want to forewarn you, because I chose to follow regulations in the United States and the United Kingdom and the European Union and the University of Chester. There's a sheet that comes in the very beginning when you click on the link that is forever long, and I am required legally to have this participant information sheet that tells you how your anonymity is maintained and how the data is stored, and forewarns you that it could be distressing. So it's pretty long, and I apologize ahead, but every word on there I had to put on. So I do hope that you can get past that first sheet, and would really welcome you and have much gratitude for you if you're willing to fill that out.
Yeah, well, it takes about 45 minutes to do the survey. That's what your announcement says. So let's share this far and wide, see if we can get a cohort that's publishable, that's statistically significant for the research that Charisse wants to do. And let's improve our world for birthing parents and babies.
Yeah, inshallah.
Thank you, Charisse. And
Thank you.
all right, see you all later out there.
Okay. Thank you, Kate.